Well, hello everyone. Today I'm going to give a little presentation that's entitled Hybrid Cognition Reasoning Traces. And this will be showing the importance of capturing how humans and AI think together, those reasoning traces, and how by maintaining a learning log, if you like, of that, you will be more capable of starting to bring into the market new artificial intelligence systems such as Anthropic and DeepMind. So let's get into it. So today, AI runs several risks because without understanding its reasoning and how it works with us, we are open to hallucination risk, both as individuals and as corporates, overconfidence, and bad decisions that cannot be interrogated. Alternatively, we run the risk of not understanding the full power and weight of generative AI. We treat it instrumentally. We engage in simple Q&A that is faster, but closes us down to understanding how we can seek novelty and new syntheses through generative AI's power. In essence, then, we can look at the current situation as combining two halves. On the left-hand side, what we can see is how AI is currently being utilized. We have rollouts such as Copilot, automation, chatbots that are used for prompting Q&A and limited chats, replete with vendors in the market such as Microsoft, Anthropic, Claude, Notion AI, Jasper, and even applications such as Grammarly. The current honest state of play, there's a very transactional approach to AI. There are some reasoning apps, summarizing notes and so forth, but in practical terms, it's all about operational efficiency. But at the same time, what we see on the far right-hand side is the future in play now, with considerable investments going on in AI labs around Anthropic, DeepMind, and other systems to deepen AI reasoning, to make the goal state full automation of human reasoning. AI systems that model or replace our roles, our human intellect. And while this remains a long-term reality, that is the direction of investment today. High capital, long horizon. And the future evolution leading to reasoning apps merging into agentic ecosystems, synthetic cognition, autonomous reasoning chains, continual learning agents. So, in short, autonomous cognitive systems. But that begs the question, what is, if you like, the middleware between these two? A transactional reality now and an autonomous full capability of AI to reason in the future. What is that middleware? I suggest that that middleware is actually the humans in the loop and how we can really, in a more fuller way, reap the benefits of the human AI loop. ARM recursion, AI recursive modeling, our discussions with AI, surfacing new novelty, new syntheses. And likewise, AI recursing with us, seeing through reasoning traces how we approach them and where novelty can be extracted. This is something I call AI augmented human reasoning as a process. And what it essentially does is it acts to join the future with today by creating persistent reasoning memory, cross-session cognitive continuity, organizational reasoning patterns, AI trained to think with humans, not just provide conclusion, and most critically, trained humans as AI orchestrators. Before we saw this as a legal requirement, now we also see it as that technological glue between the transactional now and the future. Even the AI labs in DeepMind and Anthropic talk about how essential it is to have humans in the loop. What I am saying is it's essential now to get that well-trained team, not just to accept these DeepMinds and Anthropics off the shelf, that will be table stakes, but to enable a team who can integrate them into your business, and enable a team now who can use ChatGPT and current processes in a far deeper and more effective way than they're used to date. And we can see the evidence of this from how AI AlphaFold solved protein folding, and that was done with human AI orchestration, not AI on its own, AI being guided by the kind of questioning that only humans can provide. But to date, what we see in the large language model pipeline is that these ChatGPT and the like tend to be trained on outcomes and text for the transactional, mostly, not on the reasoning trajectories in context. And it's those understanding those reasoning trajectories in context that will be absolutely critical for the future, what I call reasoning traces. And that is my challenge to you. Are you logging and learning from those reasoning traces? Because that essentially is that metaphor of the middleware that I use. So critical, of course, as I mentioned, to how we start to integrate Anthropic and DeepMind, and how we develop future models that reason more deeply, maintain longer-term coherence, adapt to human cognitive style, allow models to co-evolve with human sense-making. But it's also not just a futuristic or middleware thing. It is important now. If we can deepen our engagement with existing ChatGPTs and Claude and the like, we can unlock novelty and unlock value and unlock new syntheses. Look for second, third, nth order reasoning that can enable organizations to be more epistemically open rather than closed. Ask the question why. Find out more about why metrics might be not responding as well as we would like. Why do we keep making the same mistakes? How can we engage and ensure and lock in institutional memory? And going back to Anthropic and DeepMind, what's the reason why we should look at these and develop these reasoning traces? Well, powerful AI without reasoning traces becomes a black box or a false authority. Powerful AI with reasoning traces becomes a recursive ideas engine, something not taken off the shelf but bespoke to your business, a cognitive amplifier, an institutional memory for thinking itself. That is the argument. So now let's look at what we mean by a reasoning trace. Well, this is a slide that shows where thinking is now and what a reasoning trace is. Now we have chain of thought. What is that? We have a model, an internal explanation of how an answer was produced, typically linear, often reconstructed after the answer, designed to improve model performance, not human understanding. Chain of thought key properties are generated by AI, ephemeral, not grounded in human cognition, not persistent across time, and not organizationally contextual. In short, chain of thought explains how the model reasoned in that moment. By developing reasoning traces and keeping a log of those, what we do is we externalize cognitive trajectories, create a log of human AI and how those reasoning traces are produced. They are recursive, non-linear, revisable. They're contextual to our goals, constraints, emotions, and uncertainties. Their key properties include human uncertainty, reframing, and doubt. They span multiple sessions. They capture why paths were taken or abandoned. They, in fact, preserve failed reasoning, not just successful logic, and can be analysed, compared, and evolved. In short, reasoning traces preserve how sense-making unfolded over time, not just how an answer was computed in the moment. And how these are generated, well, I mentioned recursive modeling, humans and AI converse freely, and when a meaningful shift in thinking occurs, a short-named reasoning trace is explicitly extracted from that conversation and linked back to it. Tags can help organize traces, but the trace itself is basically a cognitive artifact. And what do I mean by traces? Well, won't in this session get into all of them, but here's a very, very simple example. We can have traces of framing and meaning, traces of epistemics, how we relate to and understand the truth. Questions like we are assuming, we don't know, we cannot do X because. Hypothesis dynamics, evidence and warrant, what observations counted, what would change our mind, or other options, option traces, test traces, decision traces, learning and transfer, reflection traces, what we learned about our reasoning, what meta logic are we applying, or identifying recurring failure modes. And a trace is a very simple artifact, as you can see on the right hand side. This is an example, very simple, a reframe trace. It's what its type is, it makes a statement, it has its context, it explains why this matter, and has some open questions. It's no more complicated than that. So, in terms of reasoning traces then, how do we obtain them? Well, this isn't necessarily by surveillance. We don't need to record everything or mine private chats or monitor employees. What we do is we opt into them. We define them through a purpose managed potentially by AI orchestrators, which are trained to explicitly reflect on thinking. So they're user authorized. Think of them kind of like lab notes or design journals or engineering decision logs or research memos. But these are intentional externalizations, tracked and traced and logged, and there for learning, both for humans and AI. And this is just a slide to give some comfort around where it fits. It certainly fits with mainstream constructs such as sense-making, abductive logic and hypothesis management, metacognition, dual process cognition, distributed cognition, extended mind, and even in biology it fits with notions of predictive processing and error signals, memory systems, episodic or semantic consolidation, neuromodulation and uncertainty, homeostasis, allostasis and constraint management, and evolutionary search logic, where we look for variation, we look for selection, and we retain. So it's a well-grounded approach. It doesn't work in all contexts, of course. It works best where a problem is ill-defined, where stakes are long-term or irreversible, where multiple framings are plausible, and learning must transfer across time or teams, and where losing reasoning means losing intelligence. And we can see that in things like strategy design under uncertainty, policy design, safety governance, science and biology, legal reasoning, AI oversight itself. Anything where there's complex system in play, in systems design, Medallia or Qualtrics constructions, or client or customer experience. Percentage terms, maybe 10% for operational automation. That's a very different system, as you can hopefully appreciate. For reporting and routine analytics, maybe 20% of its value. For product discovery, strategy, policy, governance, law, science, all those issues that I've raised before, maybe up to 90% of value. And in general terms, in BAU, human co-creation, wherever there is uncertainty or degree of uncertainty, this reasoning traces can assist. Particularly beneficial, I might also add, in frontier models. It's making them become more capable, understanding a business risk and how that shifts. So it's these kind of areas that we need to think of. So now we understand in brief what reasoning traces are and why they're strategically critical now and for integrating future AI developments. Where are they most effective? Well, in actual fact, the concept of it trains AI is actually mostly false in the way people usually mean train. Whereas it trains humans is actually largely true, and that is where most of the real value sits. So let me get into that a little bit more. Reasoning traces do not train AI in the machine learning sense, but they condition AI behavior within specific novelty and reframing contexts. Their primary effect, however, is to train the humans, the AI orchestrators, individually and collectively, to recognize, reproduce, and sustain nonlinear sense-making under certainty. So, for AI, it's narrow, the benefit, but certainly real. It conditions AI behavior, steers prompts, guides analysis, shapes interrogation, influences how AI explores a problem. That's contextual steering, not training. It provides episodic memory. For instance, examples in this organization, novelty often follows X reframe. We previously solved structurally similar problems by Y. That makes AI situationally wiser, not smarter. For AI, improves orchestration. AI now becomes better at knowing when to explore versus converge, suggesting reframes at the right moment, avoiding premature closure in that context. And that's local adaptation, not global intelligence gain. All those are critical, of course, for future investment and how we get best out of investments now. For humans, where the most value lie, reasoning traces can help us generate novelty, asking which assumptions block insight, which questions to unlock it, which frames are traps. That's a metacognitive skill acquisition. It also can help humans learn to tolerate uncertainty, because that uncertainty is preserved, not punished, because not knowing yet becomes a legitimate trace that changes behavior, now more open to engaging in complexity, complex adaptive systems, and epistemic openness, and not seeking closure and coherence too early. Now humans learn to reason with AI, not defer to it, a critical capability as AI reasoning develops their own skills further. AI becomes a much better thinking partner as we are able to think and engage with it, less an oracle or a tool. And that's new literacy, and particularly important in us understanding where her hallucination may arise. And the organisation learns collectively, not just as individuals, but learning survives turnover, thinking patterns become more visible, and that's where long-term compounding happens. By studying prior instances where human-AI dialogue produced genuine novelty and conditioning AI to recognise and support the cognitive moves that preceded those shifts, we can now, through reasoning traces, improve the likelihood that further conversations remain open long enough for the same novelty emerge. It doesn't automate creativity, but it scaffolds the conditions under which humans have often produced it. So hopefully now you get an understanding that the real benefit is absolutely from the human side, those AI orchestrators. And I don't want to underestimate also that giving the humans that sense, that feel for AI is really important. Again, helping governance and legal conditions to control issues of delivering false results or delivering hallucinations and identifying where that arises. I'm now going to deliver a really simple example in practice from a chat I had around an area of uncertainty. In this case, I chose the Shroud of Turin. How was it designed? Was it a painting? Was it something else? Was it a bas-relief? What was it? I chose that as a very open topic and one everybody knows about, and will give a very simple singular representation of what come out of recursion. Again, this isn't in any way, shape or form solving an issue. It's not in any way, shape or form giving the full scope of capability of AI, not in the least. Just giving one really small example. So what did I do? Well, on the right-hand side, you can see a little bit of the chat. I gave a document that outlined some of the issues around the Turin Shroud. I deliberately asked, in caps actually, no hallucination, be very honest, a little bit of prompting there. And then I gave some potential hypotheses or reasons that how I thought maybe the Shroud of Turin could have come about, whether physical or even metaphysical. Don't need to go into the full detail of that at all. The point here is on the left-hand side. We spoke about various things like oxidizer painting, stencils and chemistry, evaporation tricks, and so on and so forth. What we found was we increased this questioning and came up with a reasoning trace where a non-trivial shift happened in our conversation. And that was, the shroud isn't hard to solve because it's complex. It's hard to solve because it's over-constrained. And that reframing changed the entire search space. And that was a critical example of a reasoning trace that we captured. Because before we were looking at a sequence of steps that could produce the Turing shroud. After, why does any step that's introduced, introduce forbidden side effects? And that is a genuine reasoning transition. So, in short, we then create a little block of text. The type of issue is constraint-induced reframe. The trigger, accumulation of failed procedure hypotheses. The statement, which is the trace itself. The failure of all multi-step fabrication hypotheses indicates that the shroud image is not difficult because it requires many steps, but because it forbids almost all step. The problem is one of over-constraint rather than missing technique. So we can then take that and look for what the source of it is and what the implication of that might be. So future hypotheses should focus on single event or category level physical processes rather than procedural trains. So when a problem repeatedly defeats procedural examination, the correct move is not to add steps, but to re-examine the constraint structure. And that's really what we're talking about here. And of course, you can take that trace, that reasoning trace, and apply it to a different context. In this particular example, constraint-induced reframe can now be reapplied to pricing models and then say it's actually not increasing the level of pricing sophistication by endless steps, but that customers themselves may not be evaluating by price independently of issues such as trust. So again, I'm not trying to give the example that is the be-all and end-of-all of discussion. It's just a very simple example purely of a reasoning trace. If you think of it, a type of thought, constraint-induced reframe that we capture, define the context, and can apply it in a different situation. So before, we can see that we're thinking procedurally. Afterwards, we can thinking in terms of constraints and being constraint aware. You can have hundreds of these kind of reasoning traces in any deep recursion. So that is really what reasoning traces are about. Lots in that, lots of detail. I can only really cover in brief in this presentation the main aims of it and the main technicalities of it, or just to give you a flavor, no more. I hope that's a bit interesting. I'd just like you to leave with this thought. If you do not capture reasoning traces, then you are left with an employee base and a knowledge base that is dependent on the transactional approach you do now. How can you therefore move with these deep AI systems coming into play that will be coming into the market within the next few years, and certainly in the market in 5 to 10 years? You must get ready now. AI orchestration with humans, AI augmented human reasoning as a process, requires reasoning traces and you to train your team in how best to extract value from AI. Thank you very much.